The U.S. decided to destroy, with the other Western powers decided to destroy Yugoslavia in 1989 when it became evident that it was the one country in Eastern Europe that would not voluntarily overthrow what remained of its socialist system. It was the one country that was still trying for some kind of economic independence outside of the world global free market third worldization process. They wanted a Yugoslavia whose rich natural resources would be at the disposal of multinational corporations, whose populations would work at subsistence wages, whose economy offered no competition with existing capitalist producers, only new investment opportunities. They wanted a Yugoslavia whose petroleum, engineering, mining, and automotive industries would be undone and de-industrialized. And they wanted to abolish Yugoslavia's public sector services and social programs. Now, why would U.S. policymakers, you really think U.S. policymakers are motivated by some need to abolish the social programs, the public sector services, and Yugoslavia? Why would they want to do that? Do you think they are such nefarious, evil-intended individuals they would want to abolish their social programs? Come on, Parenti. Are you being paranoid? Well, why would they want to abolish our social programs? As they have been doing. Aid to families with dependent children, privatizing Social Security. That's what that president in Washington is doing. At least a third of it, he's going to chunk it off and privatize it. Right under your noses while saying he's saving and serving Social Security, public health services, public education, environmental regulation, as inadequate as all of these things have been, being cut back, cut back, cut back. Library services, oh, we used to have that service. Sorry, we don't have enough funds anymore. Not enough funds because we've got to build those missiles, you see. It's the third worldization of Yugoslavia, and it's the third worldization of the USA, and it's the third worldizations of everywhere. That's what the people in column A want. They want a nation that's run by about 50 multi-billionaires, and the rest of us will be 260 million peasants working from hand to mouth for them. Another goal behind the dismemberment of Yugoslavia is to achieve ideological monopoly. Last year, in Serbia and Bosnia, the last remaining radio station was a Serbian station. It was a dissident station. It was critical of NATO, critical of Western policy. It was the last station in all of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And the article in the New York Times, to see the reporter committing these mental gymnastics to explain why the NATO peacekeepers, i.e. Gestapo troops, went in and closed the station down, why that was a step toward more pluralistic democracy. It was a marvelous thing to watch him do these gyrations, you know, down this column. Yugoslavia, before the NATO bombings, before this war began, before that, in Yugoslavia, every opposition newspaper, every opposition political party had its own newspaper, its own radio station, and there were over 20 of them. Milosevic today has more opposition parties in his parliament than any other leader in Europe. Of course, since the NATO bombings, they've shut down all the newspapers, they've shut down their radio stations, as we had happen in this country with German stations and things like that in World War I, if you remember, and we weren't even being bombed or attacked. Milosevic has been elected president 3 times, twice of the Republic of Serbia, once of the Yugoslav Republic, or what's left of it now, in elections which foreign observers said were pretty much okay and legitimate. Yet he has been called a dictator. He is called a war criminal. The Hague War Crimes Tribunal has asked the United States for documentation of the war crimes that he has committed so that they may indict him as a war criminal. So far, it's been over a year. No documentation has been forthcoming. Will you please tell me, Noam Chomsky called him the monstrous Milosevic, giving no specifics. Could someone start giving me some specifics about it? Yugoslavia has another problem on this ideological monopoly. Its TV station is state-owned and is run by people who do not see the world the way the U.S. State Department and the U.S. National Security State does. The Yugoslav TV journalist Novenka Jovicic told me, if I pronounce her last name right, I remember, she told me when I met her in Greece, this was at a conference, she told me that she asked the U.S. ambassador, "What do you want from us?" This was last year before the bombings. And he said, "We want your television system. Give us that." The U.S. imperialists want an ideological monopoly of all the world's media. And they've got something close to that already. In 1992, another blow was delivered against what remained of Yugoslavia. International sanctions led by the U.S. A freeze was imposed on all trade with Yugoslavia. The results brought utter economic disaster, hyperinflation, mass unemployment up to 70%, malnourishment, the collapse of the healthcare system at great cost to the population. By the way, sanctions, as the sanctions in Iraq demonstrate so horribly, the civilian population does not suffer collateral damage or incidental spin-off from sanctions. The civilian population is the primary target of sanctions. That's who's being targeted. To justify this violent intervention to the U.S. public, there's been an unrelenting demonization of the Serbian people for the better part of a decade. Don't take my word for it. Listen to Charles Boyd, listen to his credentials, former deputy commander of the U.S. European Command. Listen to where he wrote in Foreign Affairs, the establishment journal, the establishment foreign policy journal in the U.S. In Foreign Affairs, September-October '94, Boyd says, "The popular image of this war in Bosnia is one of unrelenting Serbian expansion. In fact, what the Croatians call the occupied territories is land which the Serbs have held for more than 3 centuries. Most of the same is true of Serb land in Bosnia. In short, the Serbs are trying to hold on to their own. The U.S. has punished one side in this war, and unfairly," Boyd says. "It has supported the legitimacy of a leadership in the Bosnian Muslim government that has become increasingly ethnocentric in its makeup, single-party in its rule, and manipulative in its diplomacy. We say we want peace, but we have encouraged a deepening of the war." Why were the Serbs targeted for demonization? By the way, at first they weren't. The U.S. was sort of backing the Serbs, and they pulled a guy up who they decided would be their man in the breaking up of Yugoslavia. He was a banker, and he was a Serbian nationalist, and his commitment to communism was very, very fuzzy or vague. And he was the ideal guy, they thought, and they called him a charismatic personality. His name was Milosevic. And he was our guy. But when they discovered that instead of being a tool, he would be an obstacle, then, of course, he became demonized. The Serbs are the largest nationality, and they're the one most opposed to the breakup of the Federation. But what about all the atrocities they've committed? Well, atrocities and executions have been committed on all 3 sides. You know, it really was fascinating. Someone's got to do a media analysis of this. In '95, when Clinton was thinking of going in to Bosnia, the atrocity stories about the Serbs started piping up. I'll talk about some of them later in a minute. When he decided, as the '96 election started getting closer, when he decided it might be too messy and we shouldn't go in, the atrocity stories slowed down, and then the media started. There was a frame of maybe about a month or a couple of months there, a frame where they started saying, the Serbs are not the only ones committing atrocities, and they started quoting Croatian and Muslim atrocities and this sort of thing. It was amazing. Then when he decided after '96 that he was going to go in again, then the Serb atrocity stories came up again. It's sort of like the gas flame on your stove, the way the media will follow policy. And there's no hidden mystery about it. There's no conspiracy about it. They wait till what's fed out to them. If the Pentagon or the U.S. or the White House says this is terrible, they say, this is terrible. We've got to go do this. They've got to go do this. U.S. are concerned. We've got to go do that. They are the stenographers of power, you see. They're not the watchdogs of democracy. They're the lapdogs of the national security state. Mm.